Usually I'm the one training TEDx speakers, but since for the first time in LAU history, I'm not the owner of the license, I can actually give the talk. So, all right. So, thank you everyone for being here today. I know it's been a long ride. Now, what I'm here to talk to you about is something personal that became problematic. But first, I'm going to start with a simple story. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this poster from the movie Wicked. And it's okay if you're not, but it did end up taking a lot of awards, and it stole the show when it came to viewership last summer. And out of the multitude of teenagers that were in the room, my 42-year-old self and my husband's 45-year-old self sat there for 3 hours, enjoying every single minute and every single song. We loved it. But not only that, we didn't just love the movie. It's long. It's not for everyone. But we also loved everything that the artists, Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo, ended up doing afterwards. One of those was their wonderful live performance at the Oscars earlier this year. Now, when they performed this year, what ended up happening was, just like any live show, errors occur, flaws happen. And suddenly, people started talking about how, oh my God, we can hear Ariana breathe, just like you can hear me breathe now. And you started having comments like the ones I'm going to show you in a minute. This is a thread on Reddit, and it says, 3 flat notes from Cynthia? Did I hear that right? Oh my God. I enjoyed that they didn't edit her voice. I did notice a couple of notes that were flat, but I think it just proves she did this totally live. And then someone replies by saying, you know, when it's live, it's more passionate. And it's true. But the idea that I want to share with you is the following. When it comes to Autotune, we have gotten so used to listening to perfection in audio format. We've gotten so used to it that whenever we see the live version, we're shocked. Oh my God, they can be flat? Yes, they can. They're human. But not only that, we live for the bucket list item of all the concerts we want to watch. Because we don't want the auto-tuned version. We want live. We want our artist right there in front of us and us experiencing it, even with the flaws, even with the screechy microphone, which is what's happening to me right now. You're welcome. Now, why is it that I started thinking of perfection and imperfection? Honestly, it's because at one point in my life, I literally, and I'm an English major, so I'm using the word correctly, I literally could not afford perfection. This was in between 2020 and 2021 when we were all suffering, when our money was worthless, when I couldn't send the next year's tuition for my doctorate in the United Kingdom. And I had 3 more chapters to submit for my thesis. And I had a wonderful supervisor who told me, if you submit them quickly, we will put you on a continuing track so you wouldn't have to pay full fees. The Lebanese in me said, yes. However, that meant that for that summer, I submitted one imperfect chapter after another. Every time I would send my supervisor an email, something in me would slowly shout, no, what are you doing? You need more sources, you need better citation, you need more. How are you sending this? But I literally could not afford perfection. And thinking about this now, I realized that it taught me something. Ever since ChatGPT came on board and all of us in the education sector slowly started freaking out, or sometimes not so slowly, I started sharing my notion about why we need to be more uncertain, why we need to accept risk. Because when it comes to ChatGPT or any other generative AI, there is no room for uncertainty. You plug in a prompt, it generates something beautiful, and there you have it, your script. And we are tempted by how easy that is. There's the script. Why would I need to embrace anything else? And it is this script that is slowly causing us to lose any opportunity for that sense of, oh my God, do you think I can do it? This is not perfect, how can I improve it? Because the script gives us the illusion that it is perfect. Come and read into it, it's not that great. But it gives us that illusion, and we hold on to that illusion, just like most of us end up listening to the auto-tuned version of our favorite artist's songs and never experience that live excitement, that live passion that comes into the flawed. Now, this particular slide is very close to my heart, and I've included it in every single presentation I've done on AI. How are we not robots? How do we embrace that humanity? I have a colleague who's actually here with me today, and she says whenever she receives an email from a student and it includes typos, she smiles because she knows they wrote it themselves. Now, I'm not saying embrace the typos. Typos are horrible. But it's the idea of us still having an opportunity to be ourselves, even if the self we project is not perfect, even if it comes off screechy. And even if we go back to the old familiar, just replying with yes and no, rather than 3 paragraphs that are completely useless, just because we're able to generate them. Now, I've come here today to tell you that, of course, it's not too late. Of course, there's hope. But how can we embrace discord? How can we embrace the flawed in a world that is quickly telling us, no, 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 go, be perfect, choose that polished version of yourself? Now, I'm going to go for one of the first ways in which we can do that, which is in our spaces to allow dissonance, to allow something that is not always harmonious, to allow the screechy microphone. What does that look like? It looks like embracing the fact that sometimes things are not going to go our way, not easy. Most of us like the script. When you talk to any of my students, they hold on to that script for dear life because it gives them a sense of comfort. Nobody wants to be uncomfortable. And letting go of that script is not easy. Just like being able to accept that other people might say no to you is not easy. When we say defy, say no, go against the grain, not easy. Even research on defiance says that you probably say yes a few times before you actually say no. It's not something that comes naturally. Now, other than dissonance, the reason that this kind of disagreement is great, because it allows us to avoid things like this. A meeting that could have been an email. Sometimes a 6-hour-long meeting that could have been an email. But why is it that we do these things to ourselves? Why is it that we're holding all of these meetings? According to research in 2024, by the way, apparently 71% of employees believe that meetings are unproductive. And I know many of us have been in these situations, and we continue to put ourselves in these situations. How do we make them more productive? In my opinion, let us embrace discussions again, dialogue, disagreement that is not scripted. In one of my classes, we give our students something called a Socratic dialogue, where they're supposed to have a conversation. And do you know what our students do? Not all of them, but some. They meet before coming into the class and they script the dialogue. I'm going to ask you a question now. This is what you're going to answer. Then I will ask you that question back. This is how much we are afraid of uncertainty. And I urge you to ask yourself why. But this is not it. This is not the only thing. I also ask you to do one more thing, which is complicate our notion of professionalism. What does it mean to be a professional? Is it the vest? The vest is nice. But that's not it. The vest is barely the polish. Just like that ChatGPT generated email is only polish. What is beneath it? When we discuss professionalism, we talk about values that are very complicated. When you say things like integrity, that's not an easy thing. That is complex. And the more we accept that these values should be entrenched in professionalism, that when we talk about professionalism, it shouldn't be about how I look, but how I behave when it comes to the essentials. So that would be number 2, of being more human. Hopefully, making room for imperfection in our professional lives is more than just a statement, is more than just something we say, oh, we're going to do today. But let's see how we can practice that. One way that I think would help us practice it is by prioritizing process over product. And that's how we beat ChatGPT. Because when we're no longer so obsessed with that final product, when we go back to the way we used to structure process, the way we used to brainstorm together, remember those beautiful days? We wouldn't put a prompt into ChatGPT, we would brainstorm, and then we would go back, and then we would think and pair up and discuss. By the way, I'm not saying don't use generative AI. I'm one of its biggest proponents. I love generative AI, but it has its uses, and those are restrictive. But what else do I mean when I talk about drafting? Most of us right now are under the illusion that all we have to do is submit something and it is perfect. Tap on the back. You did great. Thank you. You're such a professional. But what happened to drafting? What happened to getting constructive feedback? What happened to that? It was wonderful. Now, most of the time, I send things and I just get great. I don't want great. I want conversation. I want dialogue. I want you to share with me, challenge me. And that happens when we do think of things as incomplete. They're not perfect. They're a draft. They're not final. And they never should be final. Now, I do something that's a little bit risky, and I'm not sure if I should mention this in a way that will be recorded for the future. But when I submit chapters, even to journals that I'm supposed to publish in, they're never perfect. And I know it. I don't have time for perfection. So what I do is I submit something knowing that that reviewer is going to give me feedback, expecting the feedback, wanting the feedback, because now I can improve and submit it to that journal again if they would have me, but to another if that first journal won't. Because that is how we share in our knowledge. When I was talking about this speech in front of a TEDx speaker last week, she told me, oh my God, you reminded me of something. It's called the Persian flaw. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of it, but I think it's so symbolic. So apparently Persian weavers, as they are working on those intricate tapestries that you can see behind me, deliberately add an imperfect stitch. This is how you know it's original, by the way. You look for the imperfect stitch. And the reason they add it is partly spiritual, because they believe al-kamal lillah, only God is perfect. But they also add it because of something that is very pertinent to the conversation today, to signify the inherent humanity and imperfection of the artist, our imperfection, our shared humanity. Thank you for listening to me today. Thank you.